All right. Um, so I'm really excited for the speaker that we have today. Today we have Dominique here. Dominique is part of many things, but was also part of the North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship in cohort 4. And I'm just pulling up his bio here. Oop, too many things. Um, I'm not seeing it anymore. But yeah, Dominic was part of the North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship in Cohort 4. Dominic is a community organizer, writer, and restorative justice practitioner who lives in the Twin Cities. So we're so excited to have you back, Dominique. And yeah, the space is yours.
Thank you, Nikuli. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Happy to be back. I was hoping that I would just share a little bit with you about restorative practices, restorative justice, transformative justice, how I think it can strengthen our movements, our communities, our people, why I think it's urgent now. And I'd like to do that using the restorative justice circle format. So if folks are familiar with that, it's an opportunity for everybody to be allowed to speak, for everybody to share in a space that is confidential, in a space where you could show up as your full self. So I'll also be having some slides to click through, so you all have some restorative tools that you could take back to your cooperatives and use in your communities or in your different spaces. I'll also just be doing a lot of talking and a lot of listening and creating opportunities for you all to speak. In order to do that, I'm going to put out what's called a restorative queue. So I've just typed up a list of you all as I join the meeting in no particular order, and I'm going to put that list in the chat. And that's going to be like our circle format. So after I speak, I'll go ahead and pass it to Leanna, who's going to pass it to Charlotte, who's going to pass it to Jessica, and so on and so forth. You may pass. If it comes to you, you feel like you don't have anything to say, that's perfectly all right. If you would like to share whatever it brings up for you and not answer the question directly, that's perfectly all right as well. Um, and if you just want to hold on to your thoughts and don't have anything to say in the moment, but might a little bit later, then you can pass and ask that we come back to you. It's a little bit tricky doing this on Zoom, but we've all gotten a little bit better at Zoom with time. So hopefully it's a smooth operation this morning. But first, yeah, about me, community organizer, lifelong learner, live over here in St. Paul. I moved to the Twin Cities in 2010. I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I was a part of the North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship in 2021 with a group of community gardeners here in St. Paul. And always happy to be back. I really believe in the work that y'all are doing and the support for the work that everybody else here is here to do. Let's see. I went through everything else. Just so you know, I'm gonna send a packet that's like a restorative justice practitioner's handbook after we meet here today. So you all will have like the details. I'll also share the slides if you're interested. So please don't feel like you have to like totally internalize everything that I'm saying or take notes or anything. I really just think that this will be a good like check-in space. But you will have the materials afterwards for your own reference. Let's see if I can. Thank you for giving me the co-host. Let's see how easily I could share, and we could just start going through the presentation. It's always more difficult than I feel like it needs to be. All right. Well, first, I want to hear from you all. Give you a chance to introduce yourselves. I would like to know what your name is. You could share your pronoun if you'd like to. You're under no pressure to. And what do you know already, or what would you like to know about restorative justice? And actually, you know what? I will stop sharing my screen right now so we could see each other and so that we could easily reference the list here in the chat. So what do you already know about restorative justice, or what do you want to know about restorative justice? I'll just start by passing it over to Leanna. And again, you may pass and have us come back to you. This just gives us a chance to all have an opportunity to speak.
Hi, I'm Liana. Pronouns are she, her. And what do I know about restorative justice or want to know. I think it's, well, I'm familiar with restorative justice, and I think just, yeah, like you said, it feels very needed in these times. But just finding ways to like continue to like build. And I think something I'm thinking about in particular is like rupture after repair after rupture, and how to just better, I guess, handle conflict, especially if somebody is not like, people have different needs in conflict, and how to like repair after, and just ways to bridge that when people have different needs. Just continuing to learn more about that. So that's what I would name.
Thank you, Leanna. How about Charlotte next?
Um, I I guess my heart is torn on restorative justice, because in a way we are all still living in a system that has systematic structures to continue inflicting the pain. So restorative justice requires a strong partnership with that group that's been inflicting pain so that they can stop. Um, the other thing is that I think we have to pull the emotion out of it, and really speak to the facts, because there's one thing that Minister Louis Farrakhan always said about hurling the truth at people. And I think the truth can be more of a, just listing the facts of why we deserve restorative justice is a more convincing storyline than emotion, because the facts speak for themselves. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next up is Jessica.
Hello. I don't know much about it, but I'm here to learn and take it all in.
Great. Next after Jessica is Monica.
I'm familiar with restorative justice as it relates to being a teacher, and I've seen it implemented in the public school system. I remember when it was a buzzword in Minneapolis public schools about 10, 12 years ago, and St. Paul public schools, not so much in the white suburbs, and it's also really big in my current district. But I just know that there's so much that I don't know, so my heart is open to learning more.
Great. Thank you. Next is Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa, she, hers. I have a understanding of restorative justice. Like I know the definition of it, but I'm unsure of how to put it into practice, especially when there is a lack of accountability or a resistance or hesitancy for other parties to acknowledge the harm that they're doing and own it. And then to Charlotte's point, because we do live under a white supremacist culture, we've been socialized and conditioned to have a fear of open conflict. So a lot of people view it as an attack when you are trying to, transform conflict and achieve restorative justice. So I'd love to learn more about that.
Thank you. After Vanessa, I have Venetia. Am I saying that right?
Yes, she did. Thank you. Wow. Yes, my name is Venetia. Can y'all hear me? I'm currently killing two birds with
I
one
can hear
stone.
you.
Okay. Restorative justice to me is about restoration and bridging a gap to get to justice. So whether that's restorative circles and creating spaces where it's unbiased and safe enough for people with two opposing beliefs to come together and have some have very I say uncomfortable conversations to get to the root of why issues are arising, why there needs restoration. So for me, like I kind of look at restorative justice as a space for just healing centered conversations. And it does take two. Like if it's you know the opposing side is the one that is inflicting the harm or the pain, they have to be willing and ready to step up and face and be held accountable, you know, and face their truth. Um, and I like what Shar said about leaving out the emotion, but I think it's like you gotta find a balance in that space because it's it's supposed to be a safe space where we should be able to um, be as authentic as we can be, but also we don't want to lose sight of why we're here. So I think it's just us. I think yeah, restorative justice to me is finding that balance between you know identifying the issues and bringing the people that are involved in one space to come up with solutions. You know, discuss the problem, discuss the barriers, and then come up with solutions together to move forward.
Thank you. Shania, oh, you already ready.
Shania. My name is Shania.
Shania, sorry about that.
It's okay. My name is Shania, pronouns she, her, and I am familiar with restorative justice from an education lens and also from some of the I guess public movements for restorative justice. What I would hope to be able to explore is restorative justice, like how we implement it in community when we have this cancel culture of and this culture of calling Black folks out. Like right now there is like a kind of movement of attacking like Black leaders. And when we're always trying to cancel folks, how are we implementing restorative practices for maybe a harm was done or maybe a mistake was made? How can they come back when we're canceling them? So that's what I'm kind of noodling on this morning.
Thank you, Shania. Next up, I have Lauren.
Hello, I'm Lauren, pronoun she, her. I can make an educated guess on what restorative justice is based off of hearing and also just looking at the words, but I'm not familiar with it at all. So I'm an open book when it comes to what I want to learn about it.
Great, thank you. Next is Brianna. So Brianna shared theirs in the chat. I'm Brianna, she, her, hers. I'm more familiar with transformative justice within the urban planning context and the ways those working with the built environment can address and eliminate harm. I would love to learn more and discover the ways that transformative justice and restorative justice are intimately connected, and passes it on to Victoria.
Hello, I am Victoria. I've used she, her, they pronouns. I prefer Victoria. I have used principles and practices from restorative justice to transform conflict and repair harms in several different kind of contexts, including mental health and within the family itself. I think it's an approach that allows for voices to be heard and expressions, and for the breaches to be repaired if the parties are actually sincere. And it's not a coerced kind of presence, folks being present. And I'm just interested in a nice refresher and having perhaps more extended conversation around deploying it, the principles and practices in other ways within the work that I do.
Thank you, Victoria. After you is Scarlett.
Hey everyone. Scarlett, she, her, hers. Okay, that's my son, sorry. Um, so I don't know too much. I've looked into it a little bit and I always liked the idea of like repairing harm instead of, focusing on punishment, which is what I feel like a lot of systems within our society focuses on. Um, I I would really like to, well, and then the context of which when I was learning it was more like victim focus with like sexual assault or somebody who's you know, had killed a loved one or something like that and using restorative justice in those ways. And I've heard that it was very successful. So it just, really interested me. And I would really like to explore how to use it in everyday life in all circumstances. So how to use it with my toddler, how to use it with a car crash, how, everything. So that's kind of where I would like to explore more, just like the everyday functionality of it.
Thank you, Scarlett. Next up is Chipo. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Um, so I'm actually also a restorative justice practitioner. I do it within the context of, my legal practice and my anti-racism work, and really just in everyday life, and everyday work. And so my approach, and understanding of restorative justice is really that, as you said, the opportunity for folks to listen and to start laying out the building blocks of repairing broken communities, or communities that have been harmed, and communities, and both people who have harmed and people who have harmed, who have been harmed, at the individual level and at the communal level. And I also do the work into accountability. Part of the accountability comes in how, the ways in which we structure and reimagine accountability from that, restoring to spiritual, emotional, whole communal health, and seeing how you then transform it into a community that even when it harms, it can continue to grow and thrive. So that's where I am. And I pass it over to Nikuli.
Good morning, Nicole, she, her pronouns. We used restorative justice, well, RTJ, restorative justice, transformative justice at Nexus. We had a committee at some point and we were sort of learning together and practicing together to try to implement some of those things back into HR. But it's been a while since we've met and done that work. So this would be a really nice reminder for some of the important things. And Keegan did just join, and I see your question, Dominique. I'm just looking for the schedule.
Great. Keegan, welcome. We're just doing a check-in right now. I've pasted in the chat a list of folks' names in no particular order, and we're just going to use that to kind of mimic the talking circle format for today. So if you wanted to share, the question is, who are you? If you'd like, you could share your pronouns, and what do you know about restorative justice or practices, and what do you want to know?
Okay, hi, good morning. Happy to be here. My name is Keegan Zavi. I use she, her pronouns. Um, I'm an artist and a gardener and several other things. Question, I know about restorative justice and practices as like a philosophy. I don't have a whole lot of like experience with like real situations to see how it could possibly work. Um, I know there's things happening in the community that would be really great as a way to be able to address certain conflicts in the community, but I have to say I have never really seen it in practice, so I'm eager to learn more.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for sharing where you're at, where you're coming from, and what wisdom you're bringing and what curiosities you have. I'm going to just go ahead and throw out the script. I believe in restorative practices as just being fully present and sitting with the tone of a space in any given time and supporting the dialogue that really wants to happen. Because as someone noted, white supremacy culture encourages us to shut down, to be to ourselves, to keep these things very under lock and key. But first, let me just jump into to my definition of restorative practices. Now, I don't have everybody that tends to define it differently. Folks who do the work and live the work will tell you that before anything, it is a way of being. And so I try not to get too hung up on anything too academic, such as like a definition. But let me just share you how I talk about it. So in the way that I talk about it, not even sure if folks can fully see my screen, just come off mute. I'm not going to be offended if you got to interrupt me if you can't see it or if I'm going too fast or if I'm not making sense. But you should be seeing, at least on part of your screen, my slides. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Not a computer guy, y'all. Okay. So how I define restorative justice is this is something that often involves the criminal justice system, and it seeks to repair the harm caused by an action rather than punishing the one who caused the harm. And so it's really premised on principles of like accountability, and of bringing in both the person who caused the harm and the person who was harmed by a specific incident and being able to broker what the repair of that harm would look like. Transformative justice or restorative practices is like a broader social science. It's a set of practices that seek to disrupt cycles of harm through building relationships that are based on a shared set of values. These relationships are accountable to that shared set of values. Many prefer the term restorative practices because it is not merely reactive, and it can include work that prevents and reduces harm. So I got started doing restorative practices in 2015. And it was really because I felt like when I first experienced the restorative practices training, it taught me how to be a better organizer. So like I said, I grew up doing community organizing, really got started in high school. And the reason that I was drawn toward social justice, social change, although these weren't the terms we used at the time, was my own lived experience. Growing up poor, growing up Black, growing up in, as I said, Indianapolis, Indiana, under not the best of circumstances, I was just instinctively drawn toward anything that would fight for a radical change that would also uplift my own circumstance. I first experienced the back of a police car when I was 9 years old. I always struggled to find my way in schooling. I had struggles with addiction when I was much younger. And as I discovered this thing called community organizing, as I discovered liberation movements, I found a vehicle where I could channel my experiences into something much more productive. And it's why I do the things that I do. And when I experienced my first restorative justice training in 2015, something just clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is how I was supposed to be doing this. Um, I'm an invitational person. I really believe in centering someone and allowing them to show up as fully human in order to tackle issues collectively. I am not a conflict avoidant person. In fact, in the past, I used to be a conflict thrivant person. And this kind of provided me a set of tools that would allow me to really decenter myself in these moments of conflict and really keep my eyes on the prize. And so I think that these are vital tools for anyone who's doing anything such as a cooperative, for folks who are working in social change. my day job is with the St. Paul Federation of Educators. So I work for the Teachers Union. And prior to that, I was doing restorative practices coaching in the district of, Minneapolis and St. Paul, but primarily St. Paul. And, to this day, even though it's not central to my work, it's central in how I do my work. I got another question for you all, and it's really based off this idea that, because I'm supposed to be here to talk about conflict resolution, repair of harm. We'll get to that. We'll get to the tools that are available. Because, folks are going to cause harm intentionally or unintentionally. And restorative justice enables us to address that harm because it's really about being relational. And so we use this term of being in right relationship within restorative practices. And right relationship is that we have these shared values. These values are being affirmed. We're accountable to those values. And even when we fall short of those values, we have an opportunity to be brought back in. And so my question for you all is, in the work that you do, why is it important to be in right relationship? I'm going to paste our restorative cue one more time. And this time, instead of passing it directly to Leanna, I'm just going to ask someone who feels ready to share immediately to just come off mute, share, and then we'll go down the list from them. And by right relationship, I really mean like we feel like our values are showing up. We feel like our values are being affirmed, and we feel like people are being held accountable to those values. Not that everything is going to be kumbaya and perfect all the time, but that we know that when an incident happens or when someone falls short of upholding these values, that they have an opportunity to be brought back in. Does that make sense to folks? Please feel free to continue asking until I make it make sense. So again, why is it important? Go right ahead.
What immediately came to mind as you were further expanding on right relationship is just that allowing you to have the psychological and physical safety that you need to really dig into something deeply and be vulnerable. And I think that's what is often lacking sometimes when we approach conflict, is not taking the time to maybe build that psychological and physical safety first.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Vanessa, as you said, the vulnerability. To that, I'd like to add the humility, because when I'm doing the work, it is, you can't, you have to be vulnerable and humble, because we all cause harm, and many of us also have had harm caused to us. And so it's in that, because there's that strength in vulnerability, that allows you to be humble, in doing the work. And fundamentally, it's really important to have that foundation, because we can't give from an empty cup. No one can give from an empty cup. And so you have to be right with yourself to then know what you're bringing to the collective, to make sure that you're restoring the collective. So you have to have good relationship with yourself, as you said, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, before you can come into trying to restore or heal any space. So.
I like to jump in too and ask the question, why is it important? Why is it important to be in right relationship in the work you do? I love this question because as an entrepreneur, I have a support group of Black women entrepreneurs that I help with one-on-one coaching. We're building authentic relationships. They're required to show up and be committed to a 9-month cohort. And I apply restorative practices, holistic wellness practices, within our group. And one thing I always uh, try to target in our one-on-one coaching is to help them develop their emotional intelligence. And I believe that that's important. Just kind of like piggybacking on what Chippo was just saying about that awareness. I think you got to know who you are first. And for me as an entrepreneur, when I started realizing I wanted to create space And some of it is co-creating, right? Because I believe in God, right? I'm very spiritual, so I'm like, I'm being close to this, but I'm also seeing some misalignment. And I feel like that does more damage than good. Trying to put on a facade to put in work in the area that requires vulnerability, transparency, authenticity, which are my top three values. And if you're not in alignment with yourself and you're in this space or in this work and you're trying to curate a space of healing that leads to justice, right, in the community, I think it's important for you to walk it like you talk it. And that's something I have to look myself in the mirror, at some of my flaws or some of my shortcomings, and also give myself grace that I'm human. But it's just about constantly fine tuning yourself to know that if you are in a work that requires you to be the moderator, the facilitator, the lead in a space that requires healing, then you should also be at some capacity healing yourself because you have to be, I believe, like a reflection, of your community. Like, it's one thing to, and I say this all the time. Honestly, I talk to kids about this. Two questions, um, or to think about this. What's the difference between wanting change and wanting to change? Wanting change is you can sit back and look at the external environment and say, people need to do this, people need to do that. Wanting to change is you looking at yourself, going inward and saying, because two is an action, you got to do something about it. I have to now be the change that I want to see. So I think it's just, I love this question so much because this is something I always talk to my clients about, um, in my support group as well.
Thank you, Venetia. I'm wondering if we can come back to seeing this in circle format, and if from Venetia we can go over to Shania and then continue it on down through the list, just to ensure that everybody's getting the opportunity to either share or pass. But if that don't work, that's all right too.
No, I'm just listening, and right now I don't have anything to share.
Okay, can I pass it over to Lauren?
I'm going to pass just because I'm a little confused on like what the question and all that is.
You want me to clarify the question at all, or do you prefer to just kind of pass for now and continue to hear other folks share?
Yeah, I'll just pass and continue to listen.
All right, thank you. Brianna is next. Brianna, are you able to share on the question? Oh, sorry, I see you in the chat. Just listening, and that's perfectly all right. I'm gonna pass it to Victoria.
Thank you. So for me, your question kind of makes me think about Thich Nhat Hanh and his compassionate listening, deep listening to allow the other person to, fully express themselves. And after we've been able to drain some of the emotion from a circumstance, being able to then have a real deep conversation about wounds, harms, and impacts and repair. And so when I think about right right relationship, as you were talking about, I was thinking about that internal that Chipo brought in about, that right relationship with self in order to know, having the self-awareness to know that you have caused harm or that you actually felt harmed, and then being able to have that kind of, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, right thinking, right feeling, right actions, and then we get what we are looking for, which is the right outcome. So I think being able to develop those relationships and practice being real with yourself first, and then getting real with other people around a specific issue is something that moves at the speed of trust. And we know that is a glacial speed. And so for me, this entire piece of being in right relationship is all about trust and recognizing that we all do make mistakes, cause harm, are harmed, and we can't throw people away.
Thank you. After Victoria, I have Scarlett.
Oh, I'll pass on mine. I'm just listening to everyone else right now.
From Scarlett, we go back to Chipo.
Sorry. What everybody else said. So at this point, yeah. Because I'm also doing peace building work and I'm embarking on a big project coming up. Because I'm in Liberia. I'm based in Liberia. And so like I said, I do the work, and so I'm also like collecting and listening and letting things kind of like sit with my spirit. So thank everybody.
Right. Up next is Nikuli.
I'm just listening, so I will pass to the next person.
All right, Keegan, you are up. And again, the question is, why is it important in the work you do to be in right relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I can echo what a lot of people have said, but just very concretely to answer your question, it's important for the longevity and health of this collective that we're building. If we want to go far, we all have to be right with ourselves and with each other. And even the people I'm in collective with right now, we've been working together for, a dozen years at least. And that's because there is times where we got to, I don't know what you call it, call-ins. We got to check each other. We got to say, hey, this is what we don't want. All of us as a collective have experiences of toxic nonprofits, toxic community organizer spaces. We all know what we don't want. And the only way to kind of like, you just kind of have to keep, it's kind of like right now at work, I'm learning how to back up a truck and a trailer, and it's constant correction. It's constant making sure that you're staying straight. So I kind of look at it that way. But that's why it's important is if we want to go far, we got to be in right relationship together.
Thank you, Keegan. I'm not going to take time, so I will just pass it over to Leanna.
I have nothing more. It's Liana, but nothing more to add.
Sorry about that, Liana. Over to Charlotte.
Okay. Well, I'm at a stage I'm probably older than most of the people here, and I'm at a stage in my life where I'm circling back around. There was a big gap in my life where I was not as much of an activist. But what I've learned during that gap period is that being in right relationship is critical for anything you do in life, because your vibration matters. How you are inside determines what you can attract and what you can put out. Your Who you are inside can make the difference in calming an entire room. Who you are inside can bring positive or negative experiences to you simply because of how you're thinking and feeling. Um, there was a quote of this famous yogi once. He was well known throughout India, and but he made sure that he lived around massively poor people. He could have chosen a different life, and he didn't. And a lot of the people were not just poor. Some of them had certain types of ignorances and mental illnesses and so forth. And they asked him, "Why do you always surround yourself with these kind of people?" And he said, "It keeps me humble and it keeps me focused." So if it's in your heart to be committed to helping others, then that's your path, then, you know, what you have inside you matters. One of the things I do remember growing up was Fred Hampton told us that we had to learn to live with, be happy with what we had and not want too much. Learn to be satisfied with what we need, because the more we grabbed after materialism, the more the system would have a hold over us. And so I think it comes down to that vibration on the inside and the level of commitment you have to being that agent of change, or that agent of help or assistance. It takes commitment, and you have to be honest with yourself as to whether or not you have that level of commitment. So that's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Next up, I have Jessica.
I pass.
Jessica, how about Monica?
So what's coming up for me about right relationship is that idea about having the right relationship with yourself. But I asked myself and others, you know, what does that really mean? Like when you have a right relationship with yourself. And for me, I know, and this is very basic, but if I don't eat well, if I don't exercise, if I don't meditate, if I don't have a schedule, if I don't have a routine, if I don't have habits to keep my A1C levels down, or my kidney disease in check, or all my other health ailments, then I am not right. And my mom, Charlotte, it it will affect my vibration. It will affect how I affect other people. So it really goes down to my routine, which I suck at. I'm just going to be honest. I'm being really harsh on myself, but I'm not where I want to be with my routine. And that's where I'm going before I can help others, is really getting my routine down so I can be right with myself first. That is important. And then I think that was it. That was it. Oh, wait, no, there was one other thing I wanted to mention, because we mentioned cancel culture and throwing people away. But you know what Victoria said is that you can't really do conflict resolution or restorative justice if all parties are not sincere, if they don't all want to move forward. So I don't believe in canceling people, but I do believe in putting people on pause. Like, nope, we need to take some time apart, because we're not all being sincere here.
Thank you. From Monica, we're going over to Vanessa.
I already shared.
All right. I'm trying to just follow everything in the chat because we kind of looped around, but is there anybody else who just wanted to come off mute and share anything, or maybe someone that I unintentionally missed? This is not your only opportunity. Like I said, I'm not offended if you got to come off mute and interrupt me, but I want to move us into another part. So folks have named the importance of having emotional resilience, the importance of self-care, the importance of knowing yourself in order to be able to manage conflict healthily, and in order to be able to attain that right relationship. So I just want to take a little bit of time and talk about the impact of trauma on conflict and on decision making. So there are a lot of ways that we could call restorative practices, trauma-informed practice, because as you know, trauma and harm are deeply interrelated, or hurt people hurt people. You all have heard that. And there's a lot of forms of trauma that aren't necessarily so personal, but that are more pervasive, like living under a white supremacist culture, being the victim of racism, sexism, homophobia, all the isms is just a persistent form of trauma. And when we live in opposition to that, when we live in resistance to that, it's a beautiful thing, but it doesn't prevent the trauma. So our approach to trauma, we got to do it twofold. On one hand, we have to enable individuals and communities to process that trauma. And on the other hand, we have to tear down systems that are persistently causing trauma. And I believe that a foundation of restorative practices create mechanisms for us to be able to do that. Because responses to trauma are coping mechanisms. They're coping mechanisms for folks who need to confront what they can't immediately solve. There's healthy responses that build resilience and give us coping skills, allow us to process our trauma without letting it define us. And there are unhealthy responses that provide an emotional reward without contributing to positive growth. Those are all deeply biological. They are survival responses. You all are familiar with the trauma responses, likely of fight, flight, or freeze. So becoming confrontational or defensive. Flight would be seeking distance from the source of harm. Freeze is when we shut down or we become apathetic or when we withdraw. And to fawn is to try and appease the threat, to try and be submissive in avoidance of that thing that is causing harm. And so I believe trauma-informed spaces are necessary. I believe restorative practices is a trauma-informed technique because we do have to have knowledge of self. We have to understand our role in something in order to be held accountable to it and in order to hold one another accountable. This is especially true in conflict, you know what I mean? And I fall into this trap sometimes of being like too philosophical about things. Like sometimes I could just sit there and think in the abstract because I think resolution is it's a very analytical thing. You know, we could sit here and try and digest all day our thoughts around resolution and what it means to be in right relationship, what it means to be at peace. Whereas conflict is very visceral. And, you know, a lot of my organizing time was spent as a young person doing organizing work with other young people. And I wish I'd had some of these trauma-informed skills at the time, especially as de-escalation and repair of harm, because that happens a lot, you know, when you're forced into the social movement space, not because of a sense that you gotta, you know, put on your cape and save the world and do the right thing, but because you feel like it's your only option. You could perpetuate a lot of harm. You can re-traumatize folks. You can center your trauma, and you could derail a lot of healthy experiences. And so when we think of approaching conflict resolution or repair of harm through a restorative lens, it's important to know how that shows up for us. And so for my next question, and I probably only got time for a couple more, but hopefully I could stretch that out as long as we need to, because I'm enjoying learning from you all. But my next question is, when you're caught in the middle of a conflict, what is it that you need? And again, I'm going to invite anybody who feels like they're ready to speak to come off mute and share. And then if we could just pass it along through the list in the chat. But again, when you're caught in the middle of a conflict, what is it that you need?
To stop, room to interrupt and regroup. So I guess Nikuli, or do we go to Liana?
Yep, it's me. Thanks, Chico. Yeah, I think for me, when I'm in a conflict, I just need like time to process, try to figure out like where I stand. And just, yeah, time to breathe for a second or work through whatever it is before I can respond fully. And time to maybe build up some things that maybe were broken in that conflict as well. I'll pass it to Keegan.
I don't do so good with such broad generalizations. There's so many types of conflict. I've been, so I guess if we're just talking about in terms of just like in a working scenario or people we work with, I need to understand all parties involved. That's what I need in a conflict. I need to always try to make sure I understand, even if I don't agree, I need to understand where the other person's coming from. That's the first thing in a conflict. And then I might understand them and still not agree with them, and then we move on from there.
I think for me, what I need when I'm caught in the middle of conflict is I need distance a lot of the time. I was raised by, I was raised in a pretty angry household. And so when things tend to upset me, when I feel that fear response, I tend to go first to anger, which, it definitely caused me a lot of harm, and brought me into contact with law enforcement when I was young, and, have never really helped me respond to a conflict or even center my own needs. And so for me, what I've learned is in the middle of conflict, I need distance to be able to honestly quiet some of those more visceral responses that I struggle to control maybe more than others. Liana?
Thanks. To Keegan's point, I think it depends on the type of conflict. But I would also echo like wanting to understand, and I'm someone that likes to address things sooner rather than later. Like I don't want to also let it like so much time pass where then it's like so many other things could be building up. And so I like to, yes, give space to the other person if that's needed, but for us to actually have direct communication around what's going on, understand, and be able to like address it in a clear way.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Well, I guess for me, it would be calm, space to be calm because, scientifically, when you get angry, it has a physiological impact on your internal organs, your heart rate, your blood pressure, and it blocks the ability of the mind to have clarity of thought. So, you have to have some kind of calming breathing exercises. Oxygenation goes into your cell structure at the atomic level and expands it and gives it time to come down and bring in that clarity that you need. So it's a scientific, we are living, breathing electrical beings. We're very complex creation here within this body, these bodies we have. And it's we're more than just physical. We have a emotional body, a mental body, an etheric body. We're very complex. And so you need that time to bring in that calm so that you can have the clarity of thought. And once you have the clarity of thought, moving forward in a successful manner becomes a lot easier. So for me, it would have to be, uh, engaging in those practices that help bring that calm to me. And breathing is number one, oxygenation of the cellular structure at the atomic level.
Thank you. And Jessica shared in the chat, need to stop and take some time, think about the whole situation, and think about how I want to approach the issue. If there's nothing more you'd like to add after Jessica, I have Monica.
Yeah, I agree with my mom. I'm sometimes quick to anger, and in that moment, the anger, it's like a volcano, and you feel the lava come up and you can't stop it. Like you're so in your feeling that you don't even go to those practices. So I need to get better at those practices of recognizing when that emotion comes up. Because hindsight's 2020. I think of every time I've ever gotten angry and I didn't need to. So practice with those strategies to calm.
Can I say something?
And Vanessa, oh,
My bad.
no, go, whoever, I guess, right?
Yeah, Keegan, if you'd like to share something, please.
Monica, were you finished? I'm sorry.
I am definitely finished.
Okay, my bad. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Not at all.
Okay, I was just also going to say, like, it's such a broad question because conflict to me isn't really conflict if both sides that are in disagreement are trying to work it out. That's not conflict to me, that's life. For me, it's conflict when the other person doesn't want to work things out. Like some people just like being angry. Some people are like addicted to that dopamine of being angry. And that for me is the conflict is when the other party or parties don't want any type of resolution. You know, I'm used to having different viewpoints, but to me, that's not necessarily conflict. That's an easy situation. What do you do when it's hard, when the only solution that you can see is walking away from the person that you're having conflict with?
I appreciate that. And what I would offer is whatever conflict is to you, to answer the question from that place. Because obviously we all have different experiences of conflict, and some people might walk away from something we felt was a conflict and may not feel it themselves. And so if it feels too broad, I would just ask you to kind of narrow it down into what you do believe conflict is. I believe next up in the queue is Vanessa, if you would like to share.
Yeah, typically what I need most in a conflict is to be heard, to have the space to say my piece, which is hard when you might be in conflict with somebody who does need that time to process, or somebody who's just like hogging up all the airtime and stuff. So that's something that's very important to me is being heard and understood.
Thank you, Vanessa. Venetia is next.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I have you repeat the question?
Not a problem at all. The question is, when you're caught in the middle of a conflict, what do you need?
I'm caught in the middle of a conflict. I feel like what I would need is to be seen and heard and understood. I'm in a space in my life now where because I have such a high level of awareness and I can see from like multiple perspectives and I just understand people a lot. Um, and I love understanding people in general. So when conflict does arise, most likely I'm like in this position of wanting to be on my end to give to the other person. I'm always open, like to give. But I'm learning now, as far as me receiving what I need in a space of conflict, is to just simply be understood. I don't want to over explain myself too much anymore. Um, because I've also been in those situations where I would go in a loop. No matter how many times I try to reframe or rephrase, I just can acknowledge at some point we just need some distance or some space. So to like manage my mental wellness and my emotional capacity when I face conflict. I just want people to hear me, see me, feel me, understand me, and allow me to just be vulnerable. Allow me to just express myself in my purest form. Safety, security, stability.
Thank you, Venetia. Next, I have Shania.
When I'm in conflict with someone, I need to work through it. Which again, as others have shared, is sometimes hard when though you have a conflict with someone who's adverse to having those conversations. But I do need to work through it and talk through it. I'm not someone who can like sit on those feelings. Also similarly to some have shared is needing to be heard and for the other person to attempt at understanding where I'm coming from. But I also need to listen so that I don't go down the road of kind of creating my own narratives and my own stories of what something meant that someone else did or why they said what they said and what was behind those words. And that's the reason why I need to work through it, because with that person versus in my own head with my own narratives, and why I like to address conflict quickly.
Thank you, Shania. Lauren, would you like to share?
Yeah, so the depth of the conflict definitely matters, but I would say in general, I'm someone who needs perspective. Like I understand perception is your reality, and my lived experience is different than others. So I always try to like look at situations how the other person might be feeling based off of that. And so like I'm just someone who wants to understand how someone else feels, even if I don't agree with you. I also feel like what I need is space, not only like time to breathe and understand what happened, but space to be heard and to talk as well.
Thank you, Lauren. Brianna, would you like to share? So Brianna put it into the chat. Please come off mute if you don't want me to speak for you. But they said, I need to understand deeply and be heard and listened to if the space allows. I also like to come to an agreement on values depending on the type of conflict so we can use it to guide our resolution, which I also prefer to happen quickly. Pass it to Victoria.
When I am experiencing conflict with others, whatever the situation or circumstance might be, what I need first is to understand why it matters to me or why it's bothering me or why I'm feeling the way I am. And so that's what I need is I need to be able to process why it matters to me at all. So that I then can come at whatever the group or individual that I may be in conflict with a clearer understanding of why it matters to me. I typically will use like the 5 I's from the 7 Challenges workbook or a process from nonviolent communication to walk myself through understanding me. And 9 times out of 10, once I understand why something mattered to me, it doesn't even matter if I have a conversation with the other folks who were involved in the circumstance or situation, unless we're trying to get something done together. If we're not trying to get something done, I never need to go back. If we're trying to do some things and stuff together, then I might need to circle back. But for me, that's my process.
Thank you, Victoria. How about Scarlett?
Yeah, I put in the chat that I'm similar to Keegan. I really need to understand where the other party or the other person or whoever, whatever situation is coming from. But then I'm also going to add to that. I also want the other party to understand where I'm coming from. So it's kind of, I like overall understanding.
Thank you. And Chipo, did you start us off this last round?
Yes, I did.
Okay, then maybe we'll wrap this round now. But please feel free again, interrupt me if need be on anything.
I just wanted to.
Go
Sorry,
ahead,
I was
please.
just. I just wanted to add to my initial comment about like stopping and then gathering myself. It's a combination of that stopping and gathering myself and going to the breath, as Charlotte said. because I do tend to immediately react. And so, like with Charlotte, for me, that stopping is like, oh, okay, go to the breath. That's why we count to 10, and then I can figure out what, how to go and how to figure that out. And I think the other thing that I wanted to add is several people have said, they'd like to get to, okay, how we're going to resolve quick sooner rather than later. And for me, that's what I want to do. But that interrupting and going to the breath then allows me the opportunity to stop and listen to how the other person, because there's also been people who are like, okay, I need to take time and step away. For me, I like to okay, let's fix this now. And so it's stopping, taking a breath, and then seeing what the other person or other group or, whatever needs. So.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for sharing. I'm always torn when I have to go off script because I do believe in some of the content that I put together, but I know that you all have that. And I also know you all have your own experiences. And again, I believe that the important thing about restorative practices is that it's relational, it's flexible. If I were to just sit here and talk at you with what I thought you wanted to talk about, it would have been less effective, even if there are things that I haven't really had the time to cover. Again, I can't stress enough that wondering in the abstract and thinking too analytically or too philosophically it's a gift, right? It's at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, those imaginings, that creative space that we can live in. Conflict is very visceral. Conflict, we encounter it every day if we leave our homes. And especially when we're doing this in community spaces, we're frequently going to be talking to people who maybe aren't as reflective, analytical yet. Maybe they haven't been taught those tools yet that we have to be able to ponder some of these more evolved and nuanced things. A lot of the time, we're going to be encountering people who are constantly living from that response from the limbic system, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So it's very important for each of us, if we're going to see ourselves as managers of conflict, as mediators, as restorative justice practitioners, it's very important for us to be able to shore ourselves up, because when you show a level of ambivalence or ambiguity when you're facilitating something that could be a violent incident, like a physically violent incident, we can really start to remove some of the coping skills that we're trying to put into people. And so I feel like it's really important to, yes, think in the abstract, but it is more important to establish a set of practices that we believe in, that we can emotionally distance ourselves from a source of conflict in, so that we can be able to manage something for the health of the group. Because restorative justice, sometimes people talk about it, and as someone who did this work in the schools, I know some other people here have done this work in the schools, there's this idea sometimes that it's kumbaya and everybody just wants us to come together, talk about an issue, solve an issue, and then we could shake hands and hug and kumbaya and move on. And there are instances like that too. I believe that if you build a foundation of restorative practices, that is building community through circles, expressing shared values, expressing shared visions through doing some of these processes, that you could prevent a lot of conflict. But obviously conflict and harm cannot always be prevented. So it is not just some of these foundational tools, some of these easier to express things. This is something that I've done with folks who are incarcerated. This is something I've done with lifers. This is stuff that I've done with folks who are returning from incarceration. It's something that I was exposed to after I was incarcerated. And also this is the work of nation building. After the Rwandan genocide, restorative practices was a massive way that folks were able to begin to repair what seems like is beyond repair, which was racial genocide. It's something that Colombia right now is using to implement new policies off the backs of their 60+ years civil war. And so it can feel like this thing that we just do to manage conflicts between ourselves. But at the end of the day, it's resistance work. This is us undoing the mental colonization that white supremacy has forced onto us. These are skills that we will need to have in a future that we're able to dream and create on small plots of land. Um, these are skills that we will need for the future of our people. Um, and so I wanted to give an opportunity to close for folks just to share how things are going, or, I just want to leave an open-ended check out for folks because I like to hear how folks are. But first, I just wanted to share a quote from something that has really taken me the last few days. It comes from Adbusters magazine, if folks are familiar. Um, and so I encourage you just to listen to this, allow it to enter your heart, enter your mind, ponder with it, sit with it, and then I will allow us to close out as a group. It's called The Ladder of Defiance. The psychological machinery of defiance grinds quietly away in each skull, in a sequence that goes something like this. Stage 1, tension arises from this uncomfortable ask. Stage 2, acknowledging the tension. Big red flag here. You don't feel right about this at all. Stage 3, expressing your misgivings out loud. Stage 4, repeating your growing urge to say no. Stage 5, actually refusing. Stage 1 and 2 are the business of the body. Your body can't really be gaslit. It knows when big pieces are being moved under cover of darkness. That's what it's trying to tell you with the rising sense of dread. It's at stage 3 that the crucial turn happens. Once you've communicated your alarm to another person, you're much more likely to follow through and actually defy. By the time you reach your fourth and final no, the topmost rung on your ladder of defiance, another emotion is in play. It's urgency. Okay, panic, of the kind that seizes folks in the final nightmarish first they came for the communist scenario. One by one, the vulnerable groups have quietly been cleared out because nobody spoke up for them. And now there's a knock at your door. Panic is the most primal fuel of all. You're going, I have to stop this. It's not even just about you at this point. It's about your grandchildren's future. The fourth refusal happens when your red line is crossed. So this is the question we need to ask ourselves right now. Where is my red line? So I just want to open it up for folks. What are you sitting with now that we've wrapped up? I hope you have a good session this afternoon, but would just love to hear, even for my own benefit, how was this morning? I'm going to throw this in the chat again, and I'll start with myself, and then I'll just pass it over to Liana. I love being in the Nexus space. I truly believe in what you're doing. I think that it's unique in movement spaces, especially in the Twin Cities, where I think there is not enough infrastructure to support our work. And so I'm always grateful to be here. I will pass it over to Liana.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sitting with what you shared just now. As some other folks have put in the chat, the line about your body can't be gaslit. Like our bodies know like what's going on sometimes before we can articulate it with words. But yeah, I'm sitting with just the reminder that these practices are needed, and like to do this kind of work requires us to know ourselves, know each other, and like continually be in that community of practice and study and practicing the very things we're trying to build. You were talking about nation building, and I'm like, yes, like this is needed, and like what does it actually mean to be in that practice? So I'm sitting with all of that right now. Thank you for being with us again today.
Thanks, Liana. Next is Charlotte.
I was just really happy to hear you talk about how we need this for our people. I think as we come, right now, we're watching the fall of white supremacy. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's coming to its end. The hegemony of the United States is ending. The other nations, especially Africa, is rising up. And so we have to believe in, I think, in the natural abilities that we have within us. We all have knowing within us. We all have, there's 16 different types of memory going through our body. uh genetic memory. You know, you may not know who your great grandfather is, but his nose is right there on your face. Your body remembers. You know, and we have knowing of solutions. Solutions can come to us if we are in the right frequency. Information comes through us. You know, if think of it this way, if a hunk of junk of metal like an iPhone can pick up waves through the air, what do you think you can pick up through the air? We're way more sophisticated than an iPhone. An iPhone can't do shit unless you put your finger on it and get it going. You don't have to put nothing on us. Everything we need is built in, you know? So, all these technological gadgets are just mimicking the powers that we have within us, but you have to turn them on. They don't work unless you turn them on, and you have to cleanse yourself of the toxins and the crap that's in this reality. You know, part of coming out of white supremacy is also coming out of the way of they live, the things they eat, the things they think, the things they do. We have a much more natural way of life, and we have to learn to get back to that and be happy and satisfied with that and not long for the chaotic illusion of a world that, think about the world that they've given us. We've poisoned our air, we've poisoned the water, we've poisoned the soil, our food is no good. The natural man lives by his intuition, his instinct, the powers within us. And we have so many powers that are going to start coming on, and we need to get used to that and have faith in it and know it. So yeah, we just have to know it. We do know. We don't have to be afraid that we won't have the answers. They will come. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next up is Jessica.
I pass.
Right. Jessica passes it to Monica.
I was very grateful for the group meditation. I realized how much I really enjoyed that. I am not the best at doing it on my own, but it is powerful in a group. So thank you so much for that time.
Vanessa.
Yeah, just grateful to get a chance to hear other people's perspectives and experiences. I think conflict is it can be daunting and intimidating because of how we have been socialized. But these are the types of skills that we need to learn and put into practice, especially in these times. We're all sensing the moment and recognizing the need for us to be in solidarity with each other. But there's been a lot that has been done to us over the 400 plus years. We've been living under white supremacy to keep us apart. And so I just hope that, you know, each of us are taking this in and spreading this message and awareness to other people so that we can begin to heal those divides.
Thank you. And it looks like Venetia is not with us at the moment, unless I'm just not seeing her on our screen. So could we go to Shania?
Um, not much to share. Just grateful for this conversation and for um, the the thoughts and ideas that you brought to the group today and leading the conversation.
Thank you. Next up is Lauren.
Just I guess thank you for the group discussion that we've had. I feel like it's been helpful learning about restorative and justice. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. After Lauren, Brianna. Brianna's put in the chat. It was restorative for me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brianna. Pass it to Victoria.
I heard my name, but couldn't push the button. Yeah, this has been a nice reminder. Some of the things that I do, of some of the things that I do practice very often without giving thought or recognizing that it comes from my previous lives doing work with organizing and working around youth issues. So it's just been good to kind of recenter some of what I do in the practices and principles, and that they still show up pretty regularly in my life. So thank you.
Victoria. Next is Scarlett. Looks like Scarlett is not with us at the moment. So Chipo.
Sorry, I had to get off mute as well. Yeah, it's a good reminder of my boundaries and, to continue to, see who's in tribe, who's in community, with me as we do this work, because as Charlotte said, we really are at an inflection point, and we, especially as Black people, need to realize and recognize, where we need to restore, and restoring is in and with our Native brothers and sisters, not in trying to restore, quote unquote, a republic that was built on their graveyards and on our backs, but to restore, true community, to then transform into, evolve, because for me, that's how I see transformation, evolve into, whole healed communities, and doing the work, to position the generations behind us to be in, healed, whole communities. So.
Thanks. Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique. I really enjoyed this. It was a really good reminder. So I echo that was said. But I also am thinking about the book, The Body Keeps Score, too, especially after that passage that you read. And so just thinking about how healing requires more than words. It also requires safety, and what that looks like in this space.
Thank you, Nicole. Keegan.
I appreciate what everybody has said so far. Charlotte, I was really feeling what you're saying. And I don't have anything to add right now.
All right. Thank you all so much. I'll be sending you some things through Nicole and Liana. I hope y'all have a great afternoon. Peace.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was like, peace, bye.
Thank you for giving me your flowers. Dang. Okay. You try to say thank you. All right.
Is he gone already?
He did. He helped
Oh my
out.
God.
Oh, it did stay on a
Thank
little
you.
longer than we scheduled. So maybe there was another conflict, but we'll follow up and give him his thank yous as well. Yeah.
I think he felt that he was like, okay, I stayed over time. I don't want to take up any more of their time because he kept saying that. It's like, okay, I'm gone, really.
But yeah, that's all we have for you this morning. I think we're just gonna transition into our lunch break. And then come back and maybe have more conversations about this part of the training as well as the community engagement aspect in the afternoon. So yeah, please take some space, take care of yourselves, take care of your bodies. And yeah, we'll see you back at 12:15.
Since, let's see, we have a few minutes. Yeah, I think it's fine if we can just settle into the space, and if folks did want to drop any thoughts into the chat or come off mute briefly, we can, but just recognizing that our next speaker may join us shortly, so can just also relax and wait a little bit. Does anyone want to share anything while we wait for our next speaker, that maybe reflections that came up? Feel free to come off mute or share it in the chat. Well, we can hold on to that till later. Looks like our guest is joining now, so we can hold that till after. Hi, Johan. Welcome.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning.
All right, so I will introduce our guest speaker for the afternoon, Johan Matthews. Johan Matthews, Principal of Mutual Design and Ecosystem Strategy Manager at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, CFNE, where he coaches local leaders, cultivates relationships, and co-design strategies that facilitate the development of equitable co-op ecosystems across the Northeast. Johan joined CFNE in 2021 and has over 13 years of experience collaborating with local leaders and institutions and emerging communities to co-design and implement equitable change strategies. He holds a BA in philosophy from SUNY at Buffalo, a certificate of graduate study in nonprofit leadership and management from Rockefeller College, as well as an MS in strategic design and management from the Parsons School of Design Strategies. Welcome, Johan. Thank you for being with us. I think I made you a co-host here, so pass it over to you.
Okay. All right. So, yes, I can share my screen. and dive in. Peace, everybody. As was said, my name is Johan Matthews. A lot more was said than was probably necessary, but it's nice to be here with you all. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am founder and principal of Mutual Design, co-design company. We work with local leaders and institutions to try to co-create spaces and services in communities where they're often left out of decision-making processes. So parks and educational services, funding services. And I extend that into my work with the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. They're a 50-year-old financial institution. And I'll share a little bit about them now. Let me share my screen. I have a little tab thing popping up that's stopping me from sharing my screen. You know, like this window. That's just let me see. Can I minimize this and share my screen down? So, yeah, I'll share this. All right. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me and the company. And then next is the Cooperative Fund. So as I mentioned, they're about a 50-year-old financial institution focused on community development by way of funding co-ops. So as the name suggests, they operate in the Northeast. And for the past 50 years, they've been trying to fund all different types of co-ops through loans primarily, maybe some small grant making. We also do co-op business coaching. We try to facilitate connections between cooperators and co-op service providers and provide educational content through trainings and things like that. And of course, it's an investment opportunity for socially conscious investors. So I started working with these guys in about 21 to think about how do they extend their services, their resources into the communities I cared about. I've been working on these types of problems for maybe the past decade. I've been thinking, okay, how do I support local leaders who are creating problems? Who have created solutions to respond to problems in our community, problems around poverty and justice and things like that. And then I started thinking, okay, how do I help these nonprofits become more entrepreneurial, access resources in their community? How do I help entrepreneurs access resources? So training, connecting them with capital. And I realized we needed to connect our communities to each other, right? We had weak connectivity between ourselves and the institutions in our community. We had weak connectivity between each other, right? We weren't coming together to do business. How do I facilitate that? And so I befriended these guys and we created a role, and I was helping them facilitate community engagement in New York and, among Black communities, immigrant communities, indigenous communities, all of which I personally can relate to. So help them build out what's called the learning team now. And my role there is ecosystem strategy manager. So with that, I'll stop and I'll give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. If you could just tell me your name, your co-op story, a little bit about your co-op, and a sweet memory you have of being in community, because that's what we're going to be talking about today, community engagement. So your name and your co-op and the sweet memory you have of being in community. So I'll start, and then I'll just call on someone. I'll have you guys do that. So Johan, as I mentioned, my practice is focused on co-design, cooperative design, and I'm involved in several types of cooperative enterprises where I live upstate New York. A lot of it is around helping local leaders, whether they run nonprofits or small businesses, to cooperate, whether it's to cooperate to access real estate or deliver services, and just ultimately co-creating ecosystems. I would say a sweet memory I have is growing up in the Caribbean. We didn't always have, we didn't have vending machines or anything like that. So to get a snack, you had street vendors. They would come right up to the fence of the school and they would pass through snacks, would pass the money. It was a hustle. And so that was regular routine. But we had one street vendor, and it was Frida. She'd been around a long time. So she had a reputation. She would often say, "Oh, you didn't give me $5, give me $1." And you're just getting 75 cents back rather than 4.75. So she was a menace, right? She had a lot of things to contend with, give her some credit, but she was a bit of a menace. So I was into starting little crew, especially little groups, and especially with guys who I thought could build the characters and things. And so to get in the crew, you have to do physical challenges, and then your final challenge was to steal from Frida and then share it with the rest of the classroom to balance it out. You know what I mean? We need to balance the scales of justice. So that was one thing you had to do, and that's something I always laugh at and think back on with my, being a kid and trying to create community. So I'm gonna invite you guys to share whatever comes to mind. It doesn't really matter, just a chance to get to know you. Okay. I'm gonna call on who left? I saw any more that I don't know. Was it Jessica?
Hello, my name is Jessica. I live in Massachusetts. I am with the Black Women in New Hampshire Social Club. And we are just trying to bring Black women together because there's not a lot of us in New Hampshire and surrounding areas. And sweet memory I have is I can't think of one right now, to be honest.
It's okay. If you can't, you can just tell me something you hope to bring back to your community, your beloved community from this session, or something you'd love to take away.
The village. I need the village back.
Okay. Can't provide a village necessarily, but I'm one more person in support. So.
No, thank you. We working on it. We working on it.
All right. All right, Jessica, call somebody else if you don't mind.
Monica.
Hello, my name is Monica, and we started a nonprofit in 2022 after my brother passed away to help the homeless or unhoused. And the idea was to create a community where they could heal. And it's been a journey, and we have not achieved that vision, but we are just considering small ways that we can help and help other organizations that serve the homeless community. And through North Star, I've kind of thought of other cooperative ideas that I'd like to participate in. And it's really related to growing your own produce and eating a healthy diet. That's really important to me because I was born with serious medical issues, and a organic diet was what saved my life. I was told I wasn't going to get taller than 4'11", and I'm 5'8" now. I was told that, I wouldn't get very far in life, but controlling what I put in my mouth and my health is what I need to prioritize if I want to make it and live a healthy life. So I'd like to work with others to achieve that on a grander scale.
Excellent.
Oh, and I gotta call somebody. Oh my gosh, Shania? Is it Shania or Shania? I'm sorry. Shania? Okay.
Yes, Shania. Okay, remind me, I remember that we're supposed to share a moment of community, but what else are we sharing? Can you
Just
remind me?
introducing yourself and your co-op, where you at?
Okay, I'm Shania Dungy, and I'm a part of a cooperative, or the beginning stages of a cooperative with two of my sisters, who aren't on the call right now. The name of our cooperative is Branch Out and Bloom, and it is about providing culturally relevant life skills education to Black Minnesotans, young adults, and children. And I would say what our cooperative was born out of is probably the moment that I'd share around being one of 7 children, so really a part of a tribe, growing up as part of a tribe, and being raised by a village. So like really being bred in each one, teach one, learning from everybody, anybody can correct you, is kind of a big moment that has like built my life and our lives and why we're doing the work that we're doing. And do I popcorn it?
Yes.
Okay. I will popcorn it over to Scarlett.
Hey y'all. Well, as she said, I'm Scarlett. I'm part of start of beginning stages of a co-op, Roots and Resilience Institute with my friend. And we both have government background, I guess, and we both met each other working through different police stations. And the overall goal of our co-op is really to get different trainers to help us out in different um, education and training for police officers and for government, and kind of putting the weight back on white supremacy, or not white supremacy, sorry, on white institutions in educating themselves about different systemic barriers, and kind of working through their racism, or working through the different systems of oppressions that we live in. And I forgot what I'm supposed to say. I don't know. A moment in community, is that what I'm supposed to say?
Oh. Yeah, that's good. A sweet moment in community, a good memory, or something you'd like to take back to your community from this session.
Yeah, so this is kind of like I don't know if bittersweet is the word, but definitely very bitter. So I'm from Dominican Republic, and very recently there was a tragedy that happened there, where a really big building, very famous, a lot of people go there, very cultural, like two Dominicans collapsed on a lot of people, and a lot of people passed away. The sweeter part to that, I guess, if you can see a silver lining, is I'm seeing a lot of people in community right now, and a lot of reflection throughout, like, so many people in Dominican Republic. Sorry. Dad, dame un segundo, papi, dame un segundo. Where everybody keeps saying things like, hug the people that you love, be around the people that you love the people that you love, because, life is so short. Just kind of that. Of course, everybody knows that anybody could be gone at any moment, but it's not always at the forefront of our mind. And, just really, like, through hardship, really enjoying being with community and having so much people understand how important it is to love each other right now.
So, and then calling somebody Scarlett, and thank you for sharing.
Keegan?
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Keegan Zavi. I'm one of the co-founders of Mudluck Pottery, which evolved from an art collective that I was a part of for, I don't know, over a decade. And right now we're looking at just a cooperative model for going forward. We want to expand. We need a new building. We need more workshop spaces. But really just looking at how we want to be in the world, because we've done a lot with how we don't want to be in the world. So we're looking for like-minded ways of thinking as we go forward. But arts and food has always been how we've engaged with the community. And I think one of my favorite memories was the summer of 2020. I had gotten some, Sage and I, the other co-founder, had gotten some funding from the city to do some creative engagements about resiliency and just responding to everything that happened, George Floyd's murder, being on lockdown, all that kind of stuff. And so my neighbors and I took the money and I paid all my neighbors to be producers for this event. And we all just came up with this wacky idea that we were going to string up sheets and fill them with paint and smack the sheets with water balloons filled with paint. And it didn't work though. So we had the best time throwing these water balloons, squirting paint all over everybody, eating. People were coming up off the street to figure out what we were doing. I have never laughed so hard. And it's one of the sweetest memories because it was a collective thing that we all just kind of made up as we went along. And it was so authentic, so pure, so funny. So that's my memory. I'm going to pass the mic to Charlotte.
Thank you. My name is Charlotte, and I'm part of the nonprofit with Monica. And so it's the same story. And a sweet memory. I guess the one of the sweet memories I have is my mom loved to cook, and she tried to feed the whole neighborhood after the riots happened in West Side, and we kind of built up a reputation of Lucy's Little Food group because she used all of us kids to uh, take the food to the neighbors who couldn't get out their house. Some of the older ones, and it one time in the middle of the winter. My mom was from the South. She didn't have the opportunity to have an education, and she didn't understand a few things. And she made one of our neighbors a hot pot of coffee. And so my brother was carrying the pot down the stairs, and as soon as we got outside the door in the cold weather, it broke and went all over the place. And the look on his face was just priceless. So, but we were, just trucking food to the various neighbors throughout the neighborhood, and it was a fun time as a kid, and the neighbors really appreciated it.
All right. So, calling somebody else. Do we have more? Yes, Lucy is awesome.
How about Vanessa? No, Venetia.
Is Venetia on? Because I'm Vanessa. I can go. Or she's not. Okay. So I'm Vanessa. I'm also part of the Black Women in New Hampshire Collective alongside Jessica. So yeah, the intent of our collective is to um, find Black women who are looking to take on leadership roles in the community. We specifically focus on Black women who have historically been excluded from leadership because they don't typically match the sort of white supremacist definition of how leadership has been defined. And so we invite them to step into their power by working with us on community projects. Um, we're actually have a goal to launch a few different cooperatives. This year, we're launching one around housing and another one on education. So we're very excited about getting that started, and the response from the community has been good so far. A community moment, a sweet community moment that I remember. There's been many, but one that immediately came to my mind was last year at our Juneteenth celebration, all of us doing line dances and just listening to music together and just having, a moment of joy even in the chaos. Oh, and Chipo.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Hey there. Hey, Vanessa. Chipo Nyambuya. My co-op is, mine and Brianna's co-op is Wiz Connect, and we're women. We're an Pan-African global majority women cooperative, and it is to support, women entrepreneurs with funding, with again, kind of like putting them together. So we're a holding cooperative, and we provide the back end kind of support for the women to run their to operate their businesses. So we're still in the financing phase, and we're hoping to break ground on our physical space at some point this year in Chicago, based in Chicago. So we're still in that growing pains part of the cooperative. I oversee the Liberia and Vietnam cooperatives. And so, like I said, we're still in the growing pains. So for me, I have these moments of elucidation, illumination, and I have the moments of just really great support from Brianna, who's not officially in the cooperative, and she's hoping she's part of the development team within of the cooperative. And so for me it's those moments of grace and support that I have with Brianna that really help anchor me. So yeah. Hornet. Charlotte, Shania, Jessica. Monica, did you go? Monica went. Okay, then Brianna, who will be participating on chat. So look out for her response on chat.
Sorry, Chipo, I walked away from my computer when you asked that.
That's okay.
All right, thanks, Brianna. Thank you. Other team. Who's last? Is it Victoria? Yes, yes.
Hi, Johanna. My name is Victoria. I live in rural Minnesota. And my collective that we are working on or our cooperative that we're working on developing more fully is Onyx Collective. And it started simply as a way to actively build community amongst Black folks who live in rural Minnesota, not very different from our friends in New Hampshire. We are so far apart geographically, and so that sense of isolation is real. So just being really intentional about building community and relationships that would allow us then to build a cooperative that could support each other's businesses, create and build the world that we want. So we're actively world building by resting and retreating right now, which is allowing us to imagine and dream so that we can then create. And I will pass it to Liana.
Thank you.
Thanks. Liana, working with the North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship, as well as just other like artists, collective spaces and community. And a sweet moment in community that I'm thinking of is in summer 2020, we're being with Black and a local Black center, Black led dance collective. We did body prayers, activations in community, and just getting together and dancing and being in our bodies was really healing for us to like collectively heal and process what was happening in our city. And I'll pass it to Nikuli.
Nikuli, she, hers with Nexus and North Star. I think one of my favorite moments in community, this was a travel moment. We went to Facing Race in Chicago. And so it was like a staff of us, and there was like, I can't remember if it was like a BIPOC or Black party situation after the conference, but it was just fun because it was like a space we could all be and just connect, and outside of like the physical conference things, and people were doing their dances, there was some line dancing. It was just like, it was just a reaffirmation of like how much I love being around Black people and like what naturally occurs in spaces when we're together. So yeah.
Right. Thank you. And it's strong there. Yeah, rest, dancing, partying. This is over the sweetest, right? All right. So I've been called to share some of my experiences, co-creating community, facilitating community engagement. So let me dive in. I'll try to share 3 stories or 3 examples of that work that I've been doing over the past 5 years, specifically in the co-op space, because that's a lot of what I'm thinking about as far as ecosystems go. I think of it in terms of a network of neighbors, right? What's the quality of those interactions? Because the neighborhood is the environment that supports the human life, right? So how do we deal with that from the co-op perspective? What supports co-op life? What's the co-op environment? So my efforts to co-create community in Black co-op ecosystems, immigrant, indigenous ecosystems, and the strategies I've used. So I'm going to reflect on a few of those. I'll stop in between for questions and just to get a sense of, what's coming up for you. So one of the first things that I thought about as I entered into this work was, where the Black people at, right? I think there was some narratives around Black people don't do co-ops. And I'm like, well, I've been trying to bring people together, Black people together, and so on, to engage in shared ownership structures, various types of initiatives. So I kind of knew it wasn't true. And 2025, we definitely know it's not true. We've been making a splash in the co-op world. But back then, this was a narrative, right? And it might be harmless, possibly, as a personal prejudice, right? You might prejudge Black people, say, okay, we're not involved in that, right? If you're not familiar with, the fourth wave theory, right? And so on and so forth. If you're not reading certain books like Collective Courage or then study historical figures like Marcus Garvey and so on, you might believe this, right? And then perhaps you mix that prejudice with a little power, right? You're a loan officer or a policymaker. All of a sudden, you're criminalizing applicants and communities that are filled with Black people, and you're getting less resources to them, right? Maybe 1 out of 10, are seeing a little bit more criminalization than most. And that discrimination leads to a disproportionate outcome between Black co-ops and white co-ops, right? We're getting less capital to them in terms of urban communities or just Black co-ops. And that creates the landscape when we look around our community and we don't see any Black co-ops. We say, oh, of course, there are Black people doing the co-ops. So that prejudice became a prophecy. So how do you interrupt that narrative? How do you make sure that we know the truth and that our people know the truth, right? Because that affects cooperators too. If you believe Black people don't do co-ops, you're not seeing other Black people as possible candidates to cooperate with as communities lose that sense that we're doing co-ops, we create less co-ops and that just becomes self-reinforcing. So how do you interrupt that narrative? So I gathered folks in my community to understand, what do we think of co-ops? Black guys who are, marketers and accountants and things like that. What do you guys think about co-ops? And so a lot of us thought hippies. They heard co-ops, they heard hippies, right? Some people didn't know. What do you think of cooperative enterprise, right? Hippies in suits, just fancy a term. And so what are people saying who are doing this work? A lot of us are saying collectives, and we still see that. A lot of us are engaging in efforts that are basically co-op-esque or co-op adjacent, and we're just calling it a collective. And so we're not connecting to that co-op economy and accessing the resources, most of which is scattered into rural areas, right? And rural coastal white rather than urban areas. So cooperative development support concentrated in rural communities, white communities, or in the South, maybe more broadly. And so there's also another barrier, status quo. A lot of our people were starting owner-operated businesses, right? We're one-man band, one woman shows. And so there's a lack of community in that, right? Facing burnout, doing everything alone. Or a lot of us are starting nonprofits, right? The only thing is you can't own a nonprofit, right? You can't distribute the resources from that nonprofit for personal gain. You can take a paycheck, you can have a bonus, but there's a lack of ownership, right? It's supposed to be stewarded by the community, even if it's founded and controlled privately. So that's what we're seeing people doing. And of course, there's our old friend miseducation everywhere around the fact that this is something we've done, right? We did it in Reconstruction after slavery. If you're, born and raised American, we did it before then, right? In the Caribbean and in Africa, right? We had our own context of solving problems in our community together, right? And after slavery, Reconstruction in the 30s, after the Great Depression in the 60s, after the Civil Rights Movement, and now, for the last 10 years or so, we're diving deep. So a lot of our people don't know it's for them. So how do you engage the community around this concept, get people to cooperate, access resources in and out of their community? Okay, these were the barriers that we're seeing. So we said, okay, let's take away a few things. On the branding side, we need exposure to self-identifying Black co-ops or, Hispanic co-ops, so on and so forth. And collective may be a more accessible term. So we gotta look for folks doing collective work because they may be already aware of the co-op model. They may be co-op curious. We need to use that energy to attract more efforts in that direction. And so there are also barriers, right? Lack of exposure and education around the cooperative model, right? It's a legal entity. It's also a way of doing business, even if you don't have that entity framework and recognition from the government. There's also this economic and political mindset of scarcity or independence, right? How do I want to do it myself, self-made? And there's not enough to go around. I can't share. And then how do you even get started? What are the first steps? So we recognize these branding concerns and these barriers, and we said, let's try to approach this. First, strategy, energy, right? So in response to lack of exposure and education, let's bring all the folks who are co-op adjacent, co-op curious together, anyone who's engaged with this business model in their own terms, collective or otherwise, and share these local success stories. And then let's create an ecosystem, right? Co-create a space for economic solidarity so we can feel more abundant, right? There are services that can work together to ultimately support emerging co-op enterprises. So energy, ecosystem, enterprise. We said that'll be our strategy. And we started talking about who this emerging cooperator could be, right? So we opened up a series of activities, platform, what would you call it, canvases like these. Who's launching collectives, since we know we're using the word collectives, right? They're community organizers, creatives, immigrants, people looking for alternatives to capitalism and so on. What are their needs, right? Functionally, they need guidance in how to start and operate a business, the resources available to keep the lights on, especially in the co-op context. Socially, they need community. They need a sense of justice to be playing out. Emotionally, we need trust, right? What are the things that are helping them move forward? Training and education. Some of us are finding these courses. Some of us found the North Star Fellowship. Some of us found other places, right? What are some of the pains, the barriers? Again, business knowledge, housing instability, legal issues varying from state to state. So we prioritize these pains and gains. How do we do training and education that is culturally relevant, right? Creating networks. And how do we really infuse that with business knowledge and support for kind of, what people are dealing with in their personal lives. So some of these we're responding to. Then we invited collectives in our upstate area, living upstate New York, to share their story. What's going on, right? Tell us your story of coming into collective entrepreneurship, right? So these are two examples, friends of mine, through my work with the Black Farmer Fund. And so we started looking into seasoned cooperators, right? This is Steph Wiley. He'd been in Brooklyn working on a worker-owned cooperative for 10 years. They exist, they pay their members, they can pay their bills. Success story. Let's bring that in and understand what's the current context of Black cooperation. Who are the cooperative developers who have this Black consciousness, who are trying to support this work? Invite those guys and co-op developers in our area, upstate New York. Invited regional experts, friends of ours from across state lines who could, see what's going on from a bigger picture and share some of that knowledge. Local experts who are co-op familiar, right? Legal experts in this case. Started inviting local groups who are living up to the co-op ideal, but not calling themselves a co-op, right? This group collective effort. They were operating cooperatively, but not necessarily self-identifying at that time. They were very curious, but that's where they were to speak about their journey. We started creating tours for all these co-op adjacent folks who are, engaged in co-op work, or the actual self-identifying co-ops who are friendly to our community, right? Doing a tour in a city called Troy, upstate. We eventually took advantage of an opportunity to join a fellowship. So we selected one member to become the fellow who would learn from, a series of regional, local leaders who are trying to engage in cooperative enterprise development in their own environments. and bring that knowledge back, right? So one of us became a fellow. That's actually a program to the Cooperative Fund, which I'll share more about after this. We had these monthly events, trying to share this knowledge with the community. And that was our story, right? We recognized the problem. There's a lack of exposure, support, and services for co-op work in our environment, in our urban upstate environment. We synthesized those insights, energy, ecosystem, enterprise. How do we bring together the energy, create an ecosystem, and leverage it to support individual enterprises? We started building community, right? Had a membership forum, these monthly calls, a Facebook group. We joined a fellowship to try to learn more and spread that learning. We started prototyping with these tours and kickbacks and study circles and focus groups. And then we launched, and at this point, we're relaunching. So that was one journey of trying to create community and facilitate community engagement around this concept of a co-op and the co-op model in upstate New York. And, you know, you can apply that story to your co-op, right? This is a story of another group who recognize we need our own space, right? They're doing different activities, trying to launch businesses, they're artists, entrepreneurs, organizers. We need our own space. So they hold visioning sessions, trying to invite their community to understand what is possible. And they have the idea this needs to be a co-op. So they started attending co-op conferences, finding co-op funders like CFNE, started doing business planning. They applied for capital, they got approved, they tested their business plan and, you know, applied lesson learned. They revisit the business plan and refinance their loan, and they were on a path to profitability, right? They already had a sense of community. This particular example was a coffee shop, and they've had to restructure and all types of things, right? So the journey continues. Maybe you're trying to create community, right? This is a story of a farmer, upstate New York again. He said, I didn't want to farm alone. And so 5 of them came together. They launched a GoFundMe, and they thought, what should we be? Not another nonprofit. Maybe let's do an LLC. I heard of a co-op. They tried to get technical support, but the SBDC representatives weren't familiar with co-ops, told them they were insane, right? So they're applying for grants. They're trying to move forward. Some didn't work out. Maybe now they're down to 2 members. It's been a long journey. Other members moved on. And now we're developing a model, trying to sign a new lease, and still on our way to community. So whatever your journey is, you know, there's lots of things you can do. And whether you're seeking a profitable business or you're in business already and trying to create community, these are some of the experiences I've had and seen. So I want to stop there and get any questions from you guys around this before I move into the next experience. What's been your experience trying to co-create community? Take a minute just to make sure there's no question. Go ahead.
I mean, for us, so for us with WisConnect, the biggest hurdle, yes, sorry. The biggest hurdle is in changing the mindset from a capitalist mindset to a, you know, again, to a collective communal mindset, because, and I understand in part, but I keep trying to tell people we will never succeed as a community on a system that is built on our subjugation and oppression. And so we have to come together as collective, as community, as cooperatives, whatever you want to call it. And truly economically liberate all of us. It takes all of us to liberate all of us. And so I would say that's been the biggest challenge is crafting the narrative, where people understand it on the emotional level, on the economic level, on the political level, the importance of decoupling from as Vanessa said, white supremacist system, because capitalism is the economic anchor of white supremacist systems. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I heard you. The ownership, the private ownership, holding the resource, we're gonna be inclined to that in this system, right? And people have to learn to share, even though it was supposedly taught to us in preschool. It didn't stick. So that's one end of the spectrum. Another thing I've seen is people being community organizers who aren't really attuned to business. So they, co-op is a business, a member-owned business. And so I see people on either side of the spectrum struggling to get their community to think like owners, right? A lot of people are thinking like workers. I'll show up and you tell me the schedule, whatever, versus, I need to pay attention to what is gonna save us money, create value for us, so on and so forth. And, same thing with the communal mindset. People don't know how to share power, right? Share decision-making, share the rewards of the effort. They're thinking they deserve more for this reason, whatever. So you have to respond to both of those ends of the spectrum, right? Cultivating the ownership mindset and cultivating community. Appreciate that. Anybody else before I move on?
Exactly.
Yep, you got it, Chipo. All right. So you can, ask your questions at the end if you want, but I just wanted to create space. I'm going to move on. So another thing that I really, realized as I was engaged in this work and helping people out is every time I started explaining what a co-op was to people, they would ask this question. They would say, why didn't I learn about co-ops, And there's a lot of reasons for that. There are a lot of reasons for that. So one thing that, I'm not going to get too deep into a structural analysis, but how do I move this thing? Yeah. So, you look at the iceberg, right? Most organizations are coming in at 3, right? CDFIs, co-op developers, they're trying to help co-ops get off the ground as businesses and get cooperators going, right? And they don't see the bottom of the iceberg, right? They don't see that, we're really a lot of the times down here, not really understanding that we have a cultural inheritance for shared ownership and cooperative enterprises and community ownership models, right? We didn't see our uncle or aunties engaged in this world. We might have seen a susu and we think, that's informal, right? That's not Main Street business model or something, right? We don't understand. And so these stories are hidden from us, right? Again, unless you start looking back at these various waves of cooperative enterprise adoption within the Black community, Reconstruction, Great Depression, Civil Rights to now. We didn't see our people doing it. We didn't get those stories passed down to us. And then we go into the training system, right? Schools, and we're miseducated, right? You don't get to share and cooperate in school, right? That's called cheating and copying. So it's completely conditioned out of you. And by the time you get to the marketplace or the workplace, you don't think in terms of cooperative economics, right? You're thinking in terms of professional development and private ownership. And now you're out there trying to get access to capital in a community that has all these underlying issues. And it's difficult to get to it, right? Wealth and ownership. So we have to reimagine this whole thing, right? We got to think about cultural recollection. How do we collect and disseminate these stories? How do we recognize where we are in this point in time? What are our gifts and how do we develop those gifts to create a solidarity around our economy and mobilize people, right? So that we own our markets rather than our seeking markets, right? We're feeding ourselves and ultimately determine our own futures through shared ownership. And what's diabolical about capitalism to some extent is that, it starts with ownership, right? We actually are trying to get to ownership in a system that starts with ownership. You're not playing capitalism until you're an owner. And we see that as the pinnacle. So you actually have to flip that thing upside down, right? Shared ownership is our pathway into ownership in this system that we're trying to evolve, right? We're walking on the ground of capitalism into this new world of mutualism or cooperativism or social, whatever your ism is, of doing it together, right? So moving into this space of ownership through shared ownership structures, owning our community is our markets as a community and providing our own capital, right? Training our people to develop their gifts and engage in cultural reclamation or whatever that says there, with the ultimate goal of self-determination, right? Not allowing the corporate economy and the American and global corporation to determine our future. So how do we flip this thing on its head? In any case, we can't respond to all these issues at once. And one of the programs we developed was the Co-op Navigator Fellowship, a program similar to this one to respond to one of these issues. You know, specifically at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, CFNE, we recognize that the nation's history of racially motivated economic exclusion had left these urban and emerging communities across the Northeast with no support to develop co-ops, right? Limited access to culturally relevant co-op development support. You can go to your SBDC, but they might not get it. The way you're trying to infuse your culture, they say, leave that at the door, right? Let's just keep this black and white numbers. It's difficult to infuse your culture, to do things the way you do them, whether you're a native in Maine, right, part of the Wabanaki tribe, or, you know, you're black in upstate New York. You want to leave your culture, you feel like you have to leave your culture at the door to interact with these prepackaged models of development, right? It says food, but they don't taste good. So that's what we're dealing with in a lot of places with co-op development. People telling you how to do it from the outside in. How do we reverse that? And so we created a 3-year fellowship program where CFNE, the central funder across the Northeast, partners with locally led organizations that are community centered, whether they're, you know, a group of Black people leading a loan fund, again, a native tribe leading a loan fund, an immigrant workforce development group who are thinking about responding to issues of immigration and workplace equity and, you know, wage theft and all these issues. And so we partner with 5 community-based, community-centered, locally led organizations across the Northeast who then partner in their community with local co-op interested organizers and entrepreneurs. And so those 2 groups of people, we connect them, and then we help train them to become an emerging class of co-op developers or cooperators, and they become co-op navigators in their community. So a 3-year fellowship, we finance a thing, and we co-created this initiative in consultation with these communities, with Black, with immigrant, Indigenous communities. And so that's this program, right? They're creating a community of practice as fellows, receiving mentorship, training, and connections from other people like me, like you, who walked this path and had to navigate this world of cooperative enterprise as it is today, right? How do we learn from who's come before us, know that we're not alone, know that we're not the last? And so that was a program. They study successful co-op models, especially from people who are like them, who've navigated this system, and they go back to their community to embed these co-opportunities and to help their host organization learn to actually provide services. Whether you previously did business support, now you can do business and co-op support. Whether you previously helped workforce development, now you can help workforces create their own co-ops to respond to these issues. So that's what our fellowship is about. And so, and in the process of developing this, we realized technical assistance is changing. A lot of people are learning about what a co-op is, as I said, as they talk to someone like me, someone who might be providing technical assistance or coaching. They're learning about that. And what we realize is that world needs to change. It needs to be less about compliance with how do you navigate the complexity of the economy or the world of cooperative enterprise, but how do we leverage what we already have, our essential characteristics and talents, to help our communities solve problems together? Or how do we create businesses that feed us, that provide valuable places to work, that house us, and do so including our cultural knowledge, our way of being and doing things. So how do we harness what's already there to create these shared ownership structures to solve these problems? That's where we're thinking this thing is going. And that's what the basis of the fellowship is, right? Ecosystem development in terms of creating homegrown development, home as a safe place for people to live their lives. So we call it life-centered learning, right? And these approaches are regenerative. They help to regrow capacities that might be obscured or lost because of, you know, racism, capitalism, all the isms. And so how do we facilitate these interactions that are mutually beneficial, right? When people are interacting with these institutions, they're not leaving themselves behind. In fact, they're bringing themselves into the creation of enterprise and solving problems. And so we want to ask ourselves, if we're engaged in life-centered learning and regenerative development, what's the essential qualities of the communities we're trying to serve? How are we helping to rediscover and express them? How do we help them to recognize and appreciate and utilize, right? A lot of people feel like if they didn't go out into the big bad world, work in corporate, they'd, get educated, they don't have something to offer. How do we change that narrative? How do we recognize that their lived experiences are needed to serve that community, making sure they're involved or engaged? How are our efforts supporting their regenerative capacities? If you're a mainstream institution, are you regenerative? So we started talking to our friends and things like that about these topics and helping them to, at least promulgating or promoting this idea. So, symbiotic, denoting a mutually beneficial relationship between the existing institutions and the emerging cooperators. And how do we even create our own institutions, to meet our needs that aren't based on trying to understand each other, because we already know. So, just closing this piece out, a lot of the strategy is about facilitating fellowship, getting individuals who are previously alone in their communities together, right? I might think I'm alone or upstate trying to make this thing happen, but there's someone in Connecticut, there's someone in Boston, there's someone in Maine trying to figure this out. And once we come together, we develop language and heal some of these misconceptions. We grow up a little bit more. How do we nurture mentorship? You're not the first, but you believe you're the first. And this system tries to say, reward us for being the first, right? You're the first Black band, first Black woman. No, we're not the first ones to try cooperation. We shouldn't be the last. How do we mentor each other and grow that? And then ultimately, how do we cultivate co-evolution? Allow our notion of shared enterprise to evolve, whether we're doing collectives or cooperatives, and help the institutions that are supposed to be supporting this work to evolve as well, so they don't have such a narrow perspective on what a co-op is. How do we allow both sides of the equation, both sets of players in the ecosystem, the co-ops, in our case, Black co-ops, immigrant co-ops, indigenous co-ops, and the institutions who might be incumbent or emerging, to come together and have a higher quality level of interaction, right? And so evolving. So I'll stop here for any questions before I move into the last one. Any questions about the fellowship or our approach? It's kind of a different level of community engagement, right? You're thinking of a broad ecosystem and you're looking at institutions and local leaders. Okay. I'm moving to the third one. I know we're tight on time. All right, so this is a third example. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the work I've done with a group called the National Association of Black Cooperators. So this is an example of a homegrown institution, I would call it, right? That regenerative approach, where we're looking to ourselves to create a space that feels like home. In this case, an association for Black cooperators across the country. And so we're doing some internal research with the members. This is a group that came out of the National Black Cooperative Agenda Conference that happens annually. Last year was in Minnesota. It was dope in St. Paul. And we wanted to learn and target specifically Black food sovereignty, that context. How does NSBC facilitate that? So we use this tool, right? It's a simple ecosystem mapping activity that you can do, where we're thinking about who are we, who are our people, and where are we in the ecosystem? Are we out here looking at our clients who are in the middle, right? Messing with partners, trying to figure this out. Partners might be other cooperators, accountants, marketing, and maybe there's a funder blocking us. Laying out who are the people in your ecosystem, who are you, who are your clients, who are your partners, who are the pain in the asses, and figuring out what does our ecosystem actually look like and using it as a conversational tool, right? So you could be eco-centric, thinking of the ecosystem, you're not necessarily centering yourself. Maybe everyone can center around the client, or you can be egocentric, right? Who's really centering themselves and, who's hard to get to, right? Who's in the circle of trust, who's not in that circle. So we just use that, and we use that to create a sense of who you're working well with, who would you like to work well with, who aren't you working well with, right? And so some of our findings are the following. So one of the things that we saw all across the country is mistrust. Black cooperators felt mistrust for the white institutions in their community because they felt they're doing it for points, literal points in their grant application, right? They might invite us into a relationship in order to get a grant. Other Black cooperators, sometimes they're being exalted as the main case study. And so now they're just doing things for points. There was this idea of power and hierarchy. When we interact with these groups, we're getting the scraps. We're getting $5,000 on a $500,000 grant to, address equitable economic inclusion or something like that. So we're getting the scraps, and we're hungry, so we accept it. How do we deal with this level of power hierarchy that's affecting us? And I would say diverse approaches and inclusive approaches. Across the country, we're approaching this so differently from so many angles, it's mind-blowing. However, a lot of us are moving in the same direction. How do we recognize that? And so in this case of mistrust, how do we cultivate cooperation? The skills to interact with those who are different and similar to us, right? We saw a lot of quotes. Some people are unsuitable for cooperation. They won't work with us when we don't have anything. Cooperative resonates with me. It makes me trust people. The more we practice it, the more it can help things. When you see other co-ops, it's encouraging. Power and hierarchy, right? How do we decolonize our paradigms, which just means self-determination, homegrown? How do we create spaces that are natural to us and say no to bad partners who want to extract our power, our resources? How do we unite and share power, right? How do we get away from systems that try to control us, right? Funding systems, policy systems, and things like that. And then finally, how do we appreciate this diversity in our approach? How do we create space for community so that we have all these different approaches, but are moving towards a common goal, right? How do we ground ourselves, know that this work is happening? How do we engage community? And so these are some of the recommendations that came out of that, right? An ecosystem mapping tool so folks can discover their neighborhood. Creating a set of sample agreements to define a better culture of interaction with predominantly white institutions or other cooperators. How do we operate fairly and equitably in our negotiations and interactions? How do we create a continuum of principled cooperation among ourselves so that people have a roadmap, no matter their approach, they can look at the checklist of things to see how well they're moving forward in this continuum of cooperation? And then finally, how do we deploy our collective capacity as a national organization to local ecosystems? So these are some of the insights that we want to move forward and mobilize on as part of NABC. And I see it's 2:18. I'll probably quick close out maybe with 2 or 3 more minutes here, if that's cool. And I won't stop now. Okay. So if there's a rule to engagement in closing, I would say people support what they help create. And this is a quote from Great Game of Business. Book that's worth your time to read. Old book. They have various reiterations. Some of the co-op are against it for some reason. But in any case, the alternative is that if they don't help create it, they will not support it. And this is true in a lot of ways. In Black community, we often see people say, no, I can't really let my ideas out yet. I got to hold on to it and perfect it. And, until I'm successful, they're not going to support me. Well, they're going to benefit from you when you're, got it all figured out rather than supporting you, right? It's 2 different things. So people support what they help create. And one of the tools is listening. That's the first tool. You got to be able to listen deeply, actively, generatively. And then storytelling. How do you create context for action? Help people see themselves as a character in the story. Get to a cooperatively ever after, a shared happy ending. And then finally, co-design. As I said, my practice is based on this tool, this strategy of co-design. How do you help people to identify shared problems? How do you help people to come up with shared solutions and shared decision-making through shared decision-making? And how do you empower people to help implement these solutions? So these are some of the tools of engagement. You want to move institutions out of outreach, where they're finally going out and telling people what they have to offer, to now listening, which is engagement. What do you think of these programs? How do we improve them? Then involving them in the design and delivery of these services, to integrating them. Now you're part of the leadership team at these institutions that exist, to ownership. How do we have our own institution that, we don't have to do research to figure out how to serve Black people, because we are the people who are running the institutions, right? So we want to get people into that. And this ultimate structure, this is a tool from DAWI, Democracy at Work Institute, is we want to look at these 4 pillars. Power, so decision-making, right? Information, whether that's financial information or financial records, other people's pay, the strategy, or money, actually accessing the money that the organization is creating. And then people, helping people to develop their own skills and capacities. This is the structure you're trying to build. A space that can facilitate the transfer and conductivity of power, information, money, and skills and development. And so finally, find a shared problem, organize your community, grow your people for power, and of course, make sweet memories. With that, I'll stop. And, if there's any questions, you can follow up with me. This will be a slide deck I'll share that you guys can have. And there's a couple of tools in here that you can use to engage people around creating co-ops, engage people around the business model for the co-op and the ownership model. So I'm going to stop sharing. If you have any questions, we can talk about that.
I don't have any questions, but I appreciate your presentation very much. I got a lot out of it. Thank you.
Excellent.
I would also echo that and just say that I love the twist on the cooperatively ever after. That is going to stick with me for quite some time.
Excellent. Excellent.
There's a lot I'm digesting, and I am going to shamelessly lift. So.
Excellent, I guess. So again, these are just some experiences I've had. It touches a lot of different things. How do you engage the internal community and the ecosystem, right? You need tools for both, and you need to be really aware of that. Recognizing there's a lot of value in what already exists. How do you draw attention to that? And then how do you create an ecosystem around that so that you can have successful enterprises? You don't want a scattering of successful cooperative enterprises, which is very difficult. You need the ecosystem, because that's the environment that allows that organization to grow, to survive, to thrive. I make sweet memories, party time, rest, gotta get that in there. So hopefully that was valuable. Reach out if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much, Johan. Appreciate you joining us. Definitely also digesting everything you shared. And yes, please send us the slide deck. We really appreciate you being with us today. And yeah, feel free to come off mute, anyone else, or put your appreciations in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Johan. Take care.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Let's hop off. Okay.
Okay, yeah. We're gonna just move into some small groups. So, and
Okay.
yeah. But thank you for being here. Take care.
Peace.
All right, everyone. I know we've gone through a lot today. Wanting to take some time just to do some individual reflection for about 2 minutes or so. And then we'll do small groups and then kind of close out with Stack to just hear from everybody in the room before we move into the survey and our closing for the day. So let's just take 2 minutes. I'm gonna put in the chat just a few questions to consider. Of course, if other things are coming up, feel free. And then we will have about 12 minutes in small groups and then come back to kind of go around. So let's take the next 2 minutes here to just individually reflect before heading into the small group.